Hello, and welcome to Beyond Books, where today we're talking about a banned book, and as always, we are going beyond. I'm your high energy host. I'm Renee, and this is my co host and mole hunter extraordinaire, Raina. So let's talk about one of the banned books that I read in the month of June. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind. I normally would have done this in the month of June, but life does have a way of inserting itself into your plans. And my June was a most extraordinary month for me. Uh, and so far, July has been as well. So we're going to do this now, and that's all that counts. But before we get into it, I do have a few housekeeping items. First, I want to say a big thank you to all who have subscribed to my channel. Thank you so much. Did you know that I've crossed over to 500 subscribers? That's right. Last weekend, with a little help from the marvelous Pat of Book Chat with Pat, I went to 500 subs and beyond. So thank you, Pat. And a big thank you to everyone who helped out. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. So, second, in a recent video, I mentioned that I had an appointment coming up this week with a medical oncologist, and that would be the definitive word on whether or not I would need chemo or radiation for breast cancer, which I was diagnosed with early in April. I've had my surgery now, and the word is heck no. I would not benefit from either chemo or radiation at this point. All the cancer is removed, and we're just trying to deter it from returning. So, oral meds only. And I'm very happy about that. And again, I want to thank all of you very sincerely for all of your support during that time. And speaking of breast cancer, one more thing. I'm going to start a breast cancer series soon on my channel. I want to make a series of videos on certain topics, such as things you might want to know about your diagnosis, tips for post-op recovery, nutrition for people living with cancer, appropriate gifts for women who are having to have breast cancer surgery, chemo, or radiation, and so on. It's not medical advice, and it's certainly not meant to take the place or substitute for any type of information that would be provided by your medical team. But after my experience, I do feel that I have some valuable information to pass along and to help ease the way for others. So I should have the first one ready soon. All will be very short videos, straight and to the point. So hopefully you'll never need to refer to them, but in case you do, for yourself or a loved one, you'll know where they are. So let's talk about the banned book I read, one of them. And that is a screenplay. Whoops, I'm sorry, Raina. That always seems to happen, doesn't it? It is a screenplay. It was written in 1958, and it debuted on Broadway in 1959. It is called A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. The New York Drama Critics Circle named it the best play of 1959, so it was well received. And in recent years, select publications have listed it among the best plays ever written. Not sure I'd go that far, but it has been made into a movie, I believe, as well, and it is worth a look. The story tells of a Black family's experiences in South Chicago. They attempt to improve their financial circumstances with an insurance payout following the death of the father. I believe that payout is $10,000. So doesn't sound like a lot of money, but in 1959 dollars, there was a lot you could probably do with that. The book itself deals with matters of housing discrimination, racism, and assimilation. And by assimilation in this context, I mean the movement of African Americans from a more urban setting into a suburban setting. Because in the 50s, 60s, and maybe even a little bit into the 70s, there was kind of the initial wave, the initial movement of everyone, and I'm talking now regardless of race, into the suburbs where homes were still affordable, but they were more modern, generally larger, and more spread out, with the possibility of owning more land than in urban areas, particularly for those who were living in larger cities. So Chicago at the time, unfortunately, was a city that was often accused of discriminatory practices along racial lines during that time. Many African Americans had previously moved into the Chicago area, generally from the South, to work in the industrial areas. In fact, this time was called the Great Migration. And I'm just going to read you an excerpt from a PBS channel website. This is a channel that's out of Chicago. And it said, "The Great Migration was the largest mass movement in American history. It began in 1915 and continued into the 70s. During the national upheaval, more than 7 million Blacks left the South and headed north and west. To Southern Blacks, Chicago was a promised land. Stories of big city life, jobs with good wages, homes with running water, and basic freedoms denied to African Americans in the South made the northern city a prime destination for African Americans coming from below the Mason-Dixon line. 500, want to make sure you can see Raina, 500 African Americans, 500,000 African Americans ultimately moved to Chicago. In the first wave of migration between 1915 and 1940, Chicago's Black population more than doubled. So we have a significant influx of African Americans into the Chicago area. Well, eventually, as people moved out of the urban areas into the suburbs, as I say, for some good reasons, then it stands to reason that some of the people wanting to move into the suburbs would be African American. And so that's what the book talks about. It's a great American thing, right? We move somewhere for a better job, for a better life. As we make more money, we want more, we want better housing. And as I said, there was generally a push to the suburbs anyway. Nothing more American than that, right? Well, this book actually has the audacity to suggest that perhaps there was a different story for at least some of the African American people. There are two practices that are outlined in the story. One is that in a choice between an all-white neighborhood and a Black neighborhood, housing in the white neighborhood was actually cheaper. So therefore, the female head of the household who was receiving those insurance funds does put some of the $10,000 down on a house in an all-white neighborhood. It was a cheaper home. The family could afford it. The second act of discrimination that occurs is that a representative of the white neighborhood they plan to move to makes an offer to buy them out, and he finds out they've made that down payment. Kind of has a vague, threatening tone, and he says that he wishes to avoid tensions over the introduction of Black people into the neighborhood. So the story advances from there as each member of the family handles this problem in a different way and makes a choice as to what the family should do. Okay, so that's the basic story. That's the background. So let's talk about it as a banned book. First, why was it banned? Honestly, it's a bit difficult to find information about that. It doesn't seem to be one of the most frequently banned books, nor could I find it on the lists of on the American Library Association website, which is the one that I generally use when I'm talking about banned books. That's probably a good thing because that means it isn't one of the most banned and challenged throughout the nation. So that's probably a good thing. But here is some of the information that I could find. Um, it doesn't appear as if A Raisin in the Sun was ever officially banned. Unlike other texts, including James Joyce's novel Ulysses and Allen Ginsberg's poem Howl, play was never put on trial. On trial. Copies were never seized by the United States Postal Service, so it wasn't one of the ones with an official banning. Ban might be too strong a word when it comes to the history of Lorraine Hansberry's play, A Raisin in the Sun. It might be more accurate to say that A Raisin in the Sun was censored, diluted, or challenged when select schools tried to prohibit students from reading or studying it. In 1979, the Ogden School District in Utah made it so that students had to get their parents' written permission before they could check out the play from the library. As you might remember, Hansberry's play brings up abortion. The presence of abortion was the impetus for Ogden's new restrictions. The film industry also, excuse me, had some problems with Hansberry's play. They thought Walter Lee, who's one of the characters, he's actually the brother of the main female character, his cutting views on white people wouldn't go over well with white audiences. That's what they thought. When the play was adapted into a feature film in 1961, some of the play's more acerbic parts were absent. So they did kind of water it down a little bit. Most recently, in 2004, though, the Normal Community High School in Illinois, Normal Community High School? Maybe it's someone's last name. I don't know. Went through a debate about whether Hansberry's play should be taught to sophomore literature students. And I do remember this being taught, I believe, at the sophomore level. I cannot remember if I was assigned this in school or not. I honestly don't remember. I don't think I was, but I know that it was taught. It might have been an African American literature course that this was taught in, but I'm not 100% sure of that. And in the high school that I went to, apparently there were concerns that Raisin in the Sun's depiction of Black people was demeaning. So that information that I just read comes from a site called enotes.com, and I'll put a link below to that. Now, unfortunately, this is typical of what I see over and over whenever books are banned or challenged. It needs to be cleaned up to make one race not look prejudiced and also cited as being maybe demeaning to the other race. And that can go back and forth between which race is in which position at which time. So part of prejudice to me is that it is demeaning to another race. That's one style of prejudice, to be demeaning. So if this is a story of racial struggles, or any other story is a story of racial struggles, then yeah, it will have language that is demeaning, and it will have accusations that are not necessarily flattering to another race of people. But I think we can all understand that not every one of any race is one particular way. Just because systemic prejudice maybe is called out, in this case, discriminatory practices, then it doesn't always mean that we all participate in that practice or that we condone it, no matter what race we are of. So there's history, there's facts. Those two things do not necessarily exist to make anyone look one way or another way, good or bad. When it comes to banned books in general, here's what I say. Let us read it, and we'll draw our own conclusions. That's basically, in a lot of ways, what literature is for. It's to expose us to something different and maybe give us a different opinion. So, one more thing. I want to read the Langston Hughes poem, which is called Harlem or Dream Deferred, and that is contained at the beginning of the book, and it contains the line from which the book, A Raisin in the Sun, is named. And this is actually the whole poem, which I didn't realize until today. So it says, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Thanks for watching.